The university's funding email had painted this opportunity as an ideal assignment: 3 months of atmospheric research in the untouched wilderness of Alaska, offering a decent paycheck and enough solitude to focus purely on data collection without interruption. I packed my equipment with genuine enthusiasm, envisioning the groundbreaking discoveries that such pristine conditions might yield. Now, stepping down from the supply truck that had brought me the last 30 miles from the nearest town, doubt crept in. I began to question every choice that led me here. The research station loomed against the endless white landscape like a cold, metallic tumor, its dark walls stark against the snow blanketing the horizon. No trees, hills, or distractions, only flat whiteness that swallowed sound and distorted perspective. The wind sliced through my heavy jacket, and I realized my preparation for the Arctic cold was laughably insufficient. The university's funding email had painted this opportunity as the perfect assignment: 3 months dedicated to atmospheric research in the remote stretches of Alaska, with decent pay and enough solitude to concentrate solely on data collection. I packed my equipment with genuine anticipation, envisioning groundbreaking discoveries born from such untouched conditions. Yet, stepping down from a supply truck that had brought me the last 30 miles from the nearest town, doubt crept in. The research station loomed against the vast white surroundings like a metallic scar, its dark facade stark amidst the endless snow stretching beyond the horizon. The landscape was utterly desolate. No trees, no hills, only unbroken white that seemed to swallow every sound and distort perspective. The wind sliced through my jacket like I was wearing nothing, and I acknowledged with a grim smile that my preparation for the cold were woefully insufficient. A gruff voice emerged from the station's main entrance. Daniel Martinez, I presume. The man looked as weathered as the icy terrain itself, face etched by hardship, beard graying, eyes heavy with the burden of experience. David Miller, I run this place. I shoulder my duffel bag and approach cautiously, every part of me aching from the cold. Thanks for having me. The university mentioned you might need an extra hand with atmospheric readings, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. David's handshake was brief but secure. Come on inside before you freeze on your first day. The station's interior hit me with a rush of stale warmth, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Narrow corridors, lined with pipes and wires, led past labs, storage rooms, and cramped living quarters. Every window I caught a glimpse of was obscured by heavy, dark curtains, sealing off any view of the outside world. The space felt confining, as if trapped inside a submarine beneath an unforgiving sea of snow. David guided me to my quarters, a tiny room barely large enough to move around in, furnished with a narrow bed and a small desk. Not much, but it's warm, and the walls are thick. I dropped my bag and followed him back to the corridor, the muffled echoes of our footsteps deepening the surreal quiet that dominated the station. Closed doors lined the hallways, and I found myself wondering how many people actually worked here. Before letting me settle in, David's tone shifted. We need to go over the station rules. These aren't suggestions. They're survival necessities. Break them, and you're risking your life. His seriousness made me want to chuckle, but his expression said otherwise. I'd expected standard safety briefings or equipment protocols, not matters concerning life and death wrapped in cryptic warnings about curtains and knocked doors. Yet here we were, and the tension was real. Upon my arrival at the isolated research station, David Miller took the time to outline a series of strict rules that seemed more rooted in paranoia than practicality. These weren't mere suggestions. They were presented as vital for survival in this unforgiving environment. The first rule was explicit. Never look outside between 11:11 p.m. and 3:33 a.m., no matter what sounds or movements might tempt curiosity. The second forbade answering any knocks on the door during nighttime hours. emphasizing that no exceptions were allowed regardless of circumstance. Additional rules mandated a complete supply inventory every Monday at 5 p.m., reporting any newly discovered holes in the ice immediately, and observing the behavior of fellow staff members for any strange or erratic actions. Importantly, the sixth rule strictly prohibited going outside after dark for any reason, sealing the station until dawn regardless of emergencies or equipment needs. Initially, these regulations struck me as exaggerated, born from the psychological strain of prolonged isolation in such a harsh climate. Yet, David and the other staff, Sarah Johnson and Thomas Brown, delivered these rules with a gravity that dispelled any notion of mere superstition. Sarah made it clear that those who disregarded these guidelines didn't return, a stark warning that shifted my skepticism toward cautious acceptance. The heavy curtains covering every window reinforced an atmosphere of confinement, and the nightly ritual of ensuring all coverings were secure felt like a protective barrier against an unknown menace lurking beyond our sight. These rules, bizarre as they seemed, were deeply embedded in the station's culture, a survival code rooted in experiences beyond what I could yet comprehend. Living in isolation at the research station, I quickly found myself surrounded by an unsettling atmosphere, made all the more intense by the peculiar behaviors of the small staff. David, Sarah, and Thomas each seemed bound by invisible threads, quietly adhering to the station's routines with a solemn dedication that hinted at deeper, unspoken fears. Thomas, in particular, stood out. His pale, gaunt appearance and distant gazes toward the curtained windows suggested he was battling invisible demons of his own. The enclosed spaces, the heavy curtains sealing out the outside world, and the constant hum of machinery combined to create a sense of confinement that weighed heavily on my mind. This environment was unlike any scientific setting I had known. Here, psychological strain whispered in every hallway, and the strange customs we followed didn't feel like rules but lifelines. As days passed, I wrestled with the growing realization that isolation was affecting all of us in ways more profound than mere loneliness or cabin fever. The station wasn't just a research facility, it was a crucible testing our mental resilience, forcing me to question whether what I was experiencing was merely psychological or something far more sinister lurking just beyond those thick curtains. That first night behind the narrow walls of my assigned room felt like being trapped inside a metal coffin. Despite the bed's odd comfort, the absence of sounds and outside light made it impossible to tell time or even orient myself. I tried distracting myself, sorting research notes, organizing equipment, but the oppressive silence pressed against my ears like a weight. Around 11 p.m., surrendering to the stillness, I changed into sleepwear. The heating system's mechanical hum provided a steady backdrop, occasionally interrupted by faint footsteps or closing doors elsewhere, a reminder that others were settling in for the night. Staring at the ceiling, I questioned why I'd taken this job in the first place. Glancing at my watch, it glowed 11:11 p.m. Suddenly, a slow, deliberate scraping sound echoed just above me, like something heavy being dragged across the roof. My mind raced for rational explanations. Ice shifting, thermal expansion, Arctic wind carrying debris. Then came footsteps, measured and purposeful, circumnavigating the station with a precise rhythm that sent vibrations through the building and made my bed tremble. The regularity made it clear this was no random noise. Drawn to the window, my hand inched toward the thick curtain, but David's stern warning echoed in my thoughts. Never look outside between 11:11 p.m. and 3:33 a.m. Breaking that rule could be fatal. My scientific instincts longed for observation and understanding, but caution held me back. The footsteps and scraping continued, a relentless patrol around the perimeter, each step resonating faintly through the walls. By midnight, the activity escalated. The scraping grew violent, As if claws attacked the building's exterior, the footsteps quickened, circling more frantically. Then came a chilling, otherworldly howling. Not wolves or wind, but a deep, guttural sound that seemed to resonate directly within my chest. Waves of that eerie hell crashed around me, some close enough to feel they were right outside. Amid the cacophony, a persistent knocking began at the main entrance. It was patient, rhythmic, unchanging, a soft knock, 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 followed by a pause, then repeating endlessly for what felt like 20 minutes. Despite Sarah's whispered reassurance about the wind, her voice lacked conviction, betraying her own doubts. The knocking shifted locations, side doors, back entrances, mapping the station with steady, insistent taps. The sense of urgency increased, breaking the mechanical rhythm, as if whatever was outside tested every barrier. Inching ever closer to my room, huddled with a pillow over my head, I endured the pounding and howls, feeling the building quake beneath invisible, unseen forces. The night stretched on, time dissolving amid relentless sounds of scraping, footsteps, howling, and knocking. Then, precisely at 3:33 a.m., silence fell, complete and absolute. The sudden absence of noise ringing in my ears. It was as if the world had been holding its breath, and now finally exhaled. Yet, as I lay there, the knowledge remained. Whatever had crawled, clawed, and struck our station was far beyond natural explanation. This first night shattered my assumptions, revealing the fragile line between scientific reason and the unknown darkness just beyond those covered windows. The morning light barely filtered through the heavy curtains as I stepped outside, the cold biting at every exposed inch of me. The spacious whiteness of the Arctic seemed endless, stretching flat in every direction without a single tree or hill to break the monotony. Around the station, the pristine snow was marked by enormous impressions, deep and deliberate, carved clearly into the frozen ground. These were no ordinary animal tracks. Each was nearly 3 feet across, with jagged edges and deep claw-like gouges surrounding an irregular circular shape. I knelt beside one, trying to make sense of its form, but it defied any known creature in the Arctic. As I traced the pattern, it became clear that these prints circled the entire station, closely following the same path outlined by the sounds I'd heard the night before. The evidence was unmistakable. Something vast and heavy had prowled the perimeter, testing every corner of the building with methodical intent. Scratches gouged the metal siding in places, perfectly matching the scraping noises that had kept me awake. My heart pounded as David appeared behind me, his face grave yet oddly unsurprised. "These tracks," I said, motioning to the impressions. "What creature makes marks this size?" David studied them without a flicker of surprise. "Some things are better left uninvestigated," he replied quietly. "You'd do well to remember that." His knowledge of their origin was clear, but he refused to share more. The magnitude of what stood outside the station walls was far beyond what I'd anticipated, and the silent warning in David's words only deepened my unease. Though the sunlight began to soften the sharp edges of the tracks, blurring them into the pristine snow, the chilling reality lingered with me. These massive, calculated markings were physical proof of a presence, something beyond normal Arctic wildlife, that circled us relentlessly under the cover of darkness. And it was clear now that the station's strict rules were not mere paranoia, but vital safeguards against a threat that defied reason or explanation. During a routine supply inventory, Daniel and Sarah stumbled upon an oddity that deepened their unease. Amidst the well-organized shelves, Daniel spotted an empty can-labeled premium salmon-flavored cat food discarded in the trash. This discovery was baffling. There were no cats at the station, and no pet food had been recorded in the supply manifests. Upon closer inspection, they found several sealed 20-pound bags of dry cat food hidden in the storage room's dark corner. All recent purchases, but absent from any official delivery records. Perplexed, Sarah and Daniel ponder how such items could have arrived unaccounted for, especially since all orders passed through David, who oversaw station logistics. The presence of these mysteriously appearing supplies raised suspicions, hinting at hidden activity or unauthorized access within the station. Sarah's uneasy glances and careful documentation underscored the gravity of this anomaly, one that didn't fit cleanly into the station's official narrative and left Daniel increasingly unsettled about what secrets might lurk just beneath the surface of their isolated environment. During my time at the station, I couldn't help but notice Thomas's increasingly unsettling conduct. He frequently became catatonic for extended periods, standing motionless before the covered windows with a vacant, mechanical stare that sent chills down my spine. At dinner one evening, Thomas abruptly froze mid-meal, his fork suspended in midair as his gaze fixed on a blank wall behind me. When Sarah gently snapped him out of his trance, he appeared confused and unaware of the episode, showing no memory of his sudden detachment. Later, I found him fiddling with the tape sealing the maintenance closet door, an area strictly off-limits, with a strange intentness that implied a long-standing preoccupation. When confronted, he muttered that he thought he heard something inside, but offered no convincing explanation. Sarah was visibly concerned by his behavior, and it became apparent that Thomas's odd actions began worsening after my arrival, including his disturbing interest in personal details about me. He inquired about my home address and family, and even asked if anyone would notice if I failed to return. The nature of his questions was unsettling, hinting at a dangerous fixation. Thomas's detachment and obsession were signs that some unseen force was affecting the staff's mental states, blurring the line between reason and something far more sinister lurking in the station shadows. Late one afternoon, while organizing some equipment near the generator shed outside the station, I noticed David standing beside a peculiar sight in the snow. As we drew closer, it became clear a perfectly round hole had been cut through the ice, nearly 3 feet in diameter with edges so smooth they looked as if shaped by a giant cookie cutter. The black abyss below swallowed the beam of my flashlight, refusing to reveal any bottom no matter how I adjusted the angle or intensity. Curious, I asked David when it had appeared. He replied grimly that it hadn't been there just that morning during maintenance checks, but had been discovered only an hour earlier. Instead of showing surprise, David seemed quietly resigned. Without offering explanations, he fetched a pot of steaming water and began pouring it directly into the hole. The hot water vanished silently into the darkness beneath the ice, producing no splash or echo. David explained simply, "Holes like these attract things from below the ice. The hot water keeps them from using it as an exit point." His casual tone and the strange act of pouring boiling water into a mysterious abyss unsettled me profoundly. It was as if sealing off unseen creatures under the frozen ground was routine here, and not a topic open for discussion. Whatever lay beneath that icy surface was part of a danger that extended far beyond the station's walls, hinting at threats lying hidden in the Arctic's frozen depths, both unseen and incomprehensible. As evening fell, a heavy sense of unease settled over the research station. The routine rituals unfolded with mechanical precision. Sarah meticulously ensured every curtain was tightly sealed. David methodically inspected the locks on every exterior door, and even Thomas, despite his strange detachment, joined in to check his window coverings. The repetition of these nocturnal preparations underscored the fragility of their situation, and I felt increasingly alienated from their world. The station's atmosphere thickened with a palpable tension, the confined spaces seeming to close in tighter with each passing hour. Conversations grew sparse and subdued, as if speaking too openly might invite the dark forces lurking beyond the walls. My skepticism wavered as I observed their unwavering commitment to these routines, recognizing that these practices were more than mere habit. They were lifelines in a place where reality itself seemed to fray. The oppressive stillness pressed upon me, the shadows cast by the covered windows deepening into something almost sentient. I couldn't shake the feeling that the staff lived in quiet terror, bound not just by isolation, but by a shared understanding of unseen dangers that prowled just beyond the thin veil of their refuge. In that moment, the station felt less like a research outpost and more like a fragile sanctuary perched on the edge of an unfathomable abyss. As the food supplies dwindled dangerously low, a harsh reality settled over me. We had only enough provisions to last a couple of days, yet the next supply delivery was still 3 weeks away. The dwindling resources weren't a simple oversight. Someone or something was deliberately causing our situation to deteriorate. I found myself trapped between obeying the station's rigid rules and a pressing need to survive. The regulations forbade stepping outside after dark under any circumstances, a rule that had always seemed excessive but now felt like the thin barrier between life and death. David's earlier suggestion about other ways to leave echoed ominously in my mind. His vacant stare had warned of dangers beyond what I understood, something far more sinister than equipment failures or supply mismanagement. It became clear that the station itself was part of a larger, incomprehensible struggle. With my hands trembling, not from cold but from the weight of this decision, I prepared for a desperate choice: to defy the rules in hopes of finding a solution outside, or to remain confined, slowly succumbing to the creeping menace within and beyond these walls. Every instinct screamed that leaving was necessary, yet every lesson drilled into us warned of the unimaginable consequences of breaking the rules. As darkness settled in once again, I steeled myself, knowing that survival demanded risks that science could neither predict nor explain. After hours of weighing my options and feeling the desperate pinch of dwindling food supplies, I realized there was only one choice left: escape the station before it was too late. The snowmobile in the equipment shed was my only chance, a rugged Arctic model, fueled and prepped, ready for the harsh terrain that lay ahead. I had scouted the route earlier. Roughly 15 miles separated the station from cold water, the nearest settlement marked on every map I'd studied. It was within reach if I pushed hard and kept moving without pause. At exactly 9 p.m., I slipped quietly out of my room, moving through the dim corridors with established stealth. The station's mechanical breathing, the steady hum of the heating system, helped mask any noise I made. David was in his office, Sarah busy organizing supplies in the kitchen, and Thomas stood motionless before a covered window in his now familiar trance, utterly unaware of my departure. None of them noticed my absence. The equipment shed's entrance emitted a metallic groan as I forced it open, echoing like thunder in the Arctic silence. I wheeled the snowmobile out into the biting cold. My breath formed thick clouds, and the temperature gauge on my suit read a brutal -38 degrees. The instant I crossed the threshold, the darkness around me felt different, thick with unseen eyes, an oppressive presence that set every nerve on edge. I was being watched. The engine stuttered several times in protest before roaring to life, its vibrations trembling beneath me. The headlights carved a narrow path through the impenetrable blackness. Beyond their glow was a void swallowing all sound and light. I started toward cold water, the GPS confirming a direct southern course across the endless tundra. 5 miles out, something shifted in my peripheral vision. A massive shape moved silently alongside me, keeping pace effortlessly despite my speed of nearly 40 miles per hour. Each time I turned my head to catch a better glimpse, the darkness yielded nothing but empty snowdrifts. Yet the faintest disturbances, displaced snow, fleeting shadows, revealed an intelligence tracking my every move. Approaching 7 miles, that silent companion shifted ahead of me, crossing from left to right, just at the edge of visibility, before vanishing once again. My heart pounded wildly as the realization settled in. This was no ordinary creature. It was capable of moving faster, circling me without entering the light. I pushed the snowmobile harder, tearing through the frozen landscape at speeds exceeding 60 miles per hour, the engine screaming in protest. The presence intensified, sometimes brushing against the back of the machine with a force that jolted through the frame. Each contact was a chilling proof. The entity wasn't just following me. It was tangible, real, and close enough to touch. At 13 miles, distant lights of cold water winked on the horizon, a promise of civilization and safety. The presence became frantic, swirling around me with increased urgency, as if desperate to pressure me before I reached the town's edge. Just as the first street lamps appeared, something struck the side of the snowmobile with such force that I was yanked sideways, skidding across the ice-covered ground with no control. For terrifying seconds, I fought to regain balance, heart hammering alongside, every nerve screaming in alarm. Suddenly, the assault halted. With a weight seemingly lifted from my shoulders, the presence withdrew into the dark expanse behind me. The machine's engine sputtered and died as I coasted into the parking lot beside Mel's 24-hour diner, the only life in Coldwater at 2 a.m. Inside, warmth and mundane normality washed over me. The waitress greeted me with casual concern, accustomed to late-night arrivals from the cursed station. As I nursed a steaming cup of coffee, I learned I was not alone. Others have fled that place in terror and sought refuge here. The station's dark secrets were no longer mine alone to bear, but knowledge I would carry carefully as I prepared to leave the shadows behind forever. Once safe away from the research station, Daniel found himself reflecting deeply on the harrowing ordeal he had endured. The eerie silence of the small town, the routine warmth of the diner, and the steady hum of normal life contrasted starkly with the oppressive dread that had consumed his days inside the isolated facility. He realized that the rules he once dismissed as paranoid superstitions were, in fact, vital survival directives, protection against an incomprehensible threat lurking both outside the windows and within the minds of those trapped in that frozen outpost. The unknown presence that stalked the station was not something his scientific training could easily explain or confront. Gone were his hopes for an uninterrupted research mission. Instead, he carried the weight of unspoken truths and haunting memories. Though he left behind the work he had come to do, Daniel vowed to preserve and respect the knowledge of the station's rules, understanding that some mysteries are too perilous to challenge, and survival often depends on knowing which boundaries must never be crossed. Daniel Martinez's once promising research opportunity at the isolated Alaskan atmospheric station had transformed into a harrowing encounter with forces beyond scientific understanding. The strict, mysterious rules imposed by the station staff, initially dismissed as paranoia, revealed themselves as vital survival protocols guarding against a lurking, unfathomable danger both outside and within the station's confines. The eerie signs, enormous tracks in the snow, unexplained disappearances of supplies, the unsettling behaviors of his colleagues, and the chilling nights filled with cryptic sounds, all painted a grim picture that rational explanation could not contain. Forced to abandon his mission, Daniel escaped the relentless presence haunting the station and found refuge in the nearby town of Coldwater, a place where others like him had similarly fled. Though safe, he carried with him the weight of unspeakable experiences and unuttered truths. Understanding that some knowledge comes at too great a cost, he chose silence over disclosure, preserving the station's rules as somber reminders of the fragile boundary between human reason and the unknown. In the end, Daniel left the research behind, forever marked by the shadow of that frozen outpost. Vowing to respect the unyielding caution demanded by the unseen horrors that dwelled at the edge of science and sanity, If you enjoyed this chilling tale, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share with fellow fans of thrilling stories. Your support helps bring more captivating narratives to life.